It's all yours, Ben.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. We are into our fourth class of 6 in the Beginner Fusion series that we've been going over the last few weeks. Last week we talked about assemblies and worked on the table build, table model. So we learned about different types of joints, mostly the rigid joints to sort of glue stuff together. We talked a little bit about components and how to separate stuff out in your model. So we're going to touch on some more of that tonight. We're going to expand a little bit on assemblies. And so we'll talk, show some more, a couple more, at least one more kind of joint, and talk about assembly motion links, which are kind of interesting, and we'll cover that a bit later. And then for those of you who didn't see, up on Instagram, Toolmasters posted the picture of what we'll be building tonight. We may not get to every feature of it tonight, but we're going to be making a clock, not necessarily a accurate functional clock, but enough to make it look like a clock and practice some new stuff tonight. So that's what we'll be doing. And let's dive into Fusion here.
Ben, I forgot. I forgot.
Oh yeah.
If anybody's new, Ben usually takes a few breaks during the build. So at that time, I'll answer your questions. If you have a question, feel free to put it in chat. If I can't answer it, I will save it, or I will save it for when Ben takes a quick breather, and we'll answer some of those questions. Sorry, Ben.
Yep. No problem. Good to remind folks of how we run the program here tonight. So I've got my TMA Fusion project up in the left-hand side here where we've been building all of our models each week. And I've got a new blank untitled model up in front of me. We're going to save it right off the bat, and we'll call it our clock. Click Save, and then we can collapse the project data panel here because we don't need to see that. And first order of business is we'll do some basic modeling to get the main body of our clock. So I'm going to go right click on the top of my assembly here and say New Component. And we'll click on that and give it a name. We'll call that the clock body. So that's going to be the bulk of the model here. Hit Enter. And it's already activated. That round button is filled in. So now that we're working within the clock body, I'm going to create a new sketch. And we'll place it on the front plane here. Click there. And we're going to start with just a 2-point rectangle. It can be really anywhere in space. I'm going to start mine in the origin point here, so I'll click, drag out to here. And I'm also going to draw another line. So I'm going to go to the Line tool under Sketch, Line, or you can hit the L key. And we'll just draw a line from corner to corner, sort of my standard way to center something. Hit Escape to get out of the Line tool. And if I click on that diagonal line, I can go over to my sketch palette and turn that into a construction line, or I can hit the X key. So that's construction line. And now we'll make a circle. So I'm going to click in under Sketch. We'll make Circle, a center diameter circle. And I'll hover over my line until it snaps to the center. And you know it's in the center when that triangle icon pops up. So I'll click from the center of my line. We'll draw that out roughly about here. Now, one thing I've said in the past is sometimes it's best to have one feature per sketch. I could have just sketched the square, but in this case, I'm doing the square and the circle. I'm actually going to do another circle. So we'll go circle, center diameter circle, and actually no, I'm going to wait on that one. Before I put dimensions on here, I'm going to talk a little bit about what are called parameters. Anytime you have a dimension or a extrusion height or like the number of items in a pattern, you aren't limited to just typing in numbers or typing in measurements. You can use what are called parameters. They're like variables that you can use all over the place in your model. You can do math calculations with them if you need to. But it's a nice way to have a few numbers that you can key in that will affect your model. So, for example, we're making this clock. Maybe I haven't decided exactly how big I want it to be, and I want to play around with it in the model and figure out what size I like. So up under the Modify section of your toolbar, there's also a button up here with this sum symbol. But if I go under Modify, go all the way to the bottom where it says Change Parameters. Actually, that may or may not be up in your toolbar. I don't remember if that's default. But if it's not, you can click the little up arrow to send it up to your toolbar. So I'm going to open up the Change Parameters window by clicking on this. And we're going to create what are called user parameters because I'm the user here. And there's a little green button, a little plus sign to make a new one. And we're going to plug in a diameter for our clock face. So I like to be descriptive with my names. I'll type clock face diameter. Now if I put spaces in here, you see it turns red. It doesn't allow spaces. So I squish everything together. You could put underscores or no dashes because it thinks that's a subtraction. So I just push it all together with capital letters, whatever suits your taste. So we're going to say that's, let's say 6 inches. Click OK. And click OK on the parameters window. And if I go into the sketch down at the bottom here, sketch dimension, go to our circle. Right now it's about 3 inches, but I just start typing. I don't even have to type the start of it. I know it was clock face diameter, but I can just start typing DIAM, and it finds the closest match on the word diameter here. So clock face diameter pops up in this little menu. I can hit enter, or I can click on it, and now I hit enter. So that dimension is clock face diameter, but it shows up here as 6 inches because that's what it's set to right now. Now my outside square is too small, so I'm just going to drag it up here so it's bigger, first of all. But I want this to be bigger than our clock face no matter what. So if I put a dimension, I'll go sketch dimension across the top here. And I don't want to key in a number here because I want this to resize as we play with it. So I can start typing diameter, clock face diameter, and hit enter. But I'm still typing in the dimension box here. So it's clock face diameter is 6 inches, but let's type in +2, and it'll calculate that out. It can parse out the math here and understand that I want an extra 2 inches. So now here, because it's a calculated dimension, it's got the little fx here. That basically means it's a function or a math function. But that comes out to 8 inches. I could dimension the height here, but I'm going to use a constraint down in my sketch palette at the bottom here. There's one called equal. And I want the top side, so I'll click on the top side, and then I'll click on the right side here. And now it's constrained them to be equal to each other. So I've got a perfect square that's always bigger than our circle. And before I stop here, I'll just do a quick demonstration here. I'm going to move this off to the side. If I open up my parameters window again and change this to 5 inches, the whole thing resizes. And that gets more interesting once we turn this into a 3D model and we can add more parameters, as everything will adjust based on the way you've set it up. So before we start extruding things, any questions to kick things off here?
I don't see any questions in the chat, Ben, but I had one. So you're saying this is really cool. I mean, coming from SketchUp, I'm looking at this as just huge.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yep.
You can set parameters for all your dimensions, and if you change one of the parameters, it'll automatically adjust the whole model for you.
Yep.
Oh.
Just to
What's the difference
show
between...
off a little...
I'm sorry, Ben, I got a couple questions that popped up. What's the difference between the push-pull feature and versus extrude?
Push-pull is sort of like a multi-purpose feature. It's sort of like a shortcut to several different features. Like if you click the push-pull and then you clicked on an edge, it would assume that you want to make a fillet, a round over on that edge. If you click push-pull and click on a flat face, it's going to assume you want to extrude it. So it's sort of like a shortcut. Depending on what you click on, it's going to think, oh, you want to do a fillet here because you want to push-pull that little arrow to make a fillet, or you want to push-pull this surface, so it's going to, oh, you want to extrude that up. So I don't usually use push-pull. I'm sort of used to my keyboard shortcuts for extrude and fillet. But yeah, Wes says here it's kind of context sensitive, so it's whatever the context is of what you're clicking on, it'll kind of direct you to the appropriate tool.
Robert, are you referring to the parameters? Robert asked, I am perhaps missing a step or setting.
Yeah, just to show you guys again in case you missed it, the parameters, it's this sort of E shape here. It's a Greek letter. I forget. I think it's epsilon. No, sigma. Not that it matters. But if you click on that up in your toolbar, otherwise it's down in the Modify menu. Change parameters. It's way at the bottom.
Okay. Robert says I can get the parameters to autofill, but not the numbers. I'm not sure what that means.
I guess I don't.
I'm not following either.
Autofill. Yeah, so when you're in a dimension, here, let me go into this one. Let's say I'm putting in a dimension. I gotta first type it out, and the first time I hit enter, it just puts that value into the dimension here, but I'm not done. Like if I click away or escape, it doesn't take. So I got to start typing it in, hit enter, and now that I'm done making my dimension, I hit enter again, and then it sticks.
Okay. All right, cool. All right, any more questions, guys, real quick? All right, Ben, looks like we can move forward. If there's any questions pop up, I'll save them for the next round.
Fair enough. All right, so we're done with our sketch. We'll go through the usual routine here. We'll click Stop Sketch. You don't always have to hit Stop Sketch because usually you're going to sketch and then extrude or revolve. I can just go and hit Create Extrude, or I can hit the E key, and it automatically stops my sketch and brings me back out where I can start extruding. Just a little bit of a time saver there. Like I said, I've got two features in this sketch, but I want to extrude the whole square first. If I click here, it's only the outside, so I got to click both of these shapes, but then I can extrude. And I'm actually going to pull this arrow backwards because next I'll want to take this circle and extrude it out the front. So it's just easier to, if I've got two things, I'll pull one out the back and the next one out the front. So I'm going to make that 3 inches thick. I could put another parameter for that, but I don't need to. So I'll do that. And now Fusion assumes that after I've made one extrusion, I'm done with that sketch. So it hides it just to keep things uncluttered. But if I want to use that sketch again, I have to expand out my component and then expand out sketches. And here, this is my first sketch. It's turned off. So I click on that light bulb to turn it back on. And now we can create an extrusion again. So we'll extrude, pick our circle, and we'll bring that out 0.25, quarter of an inch, just so it stands out a bit. And now, since I turned that sketch on manually, it's still there. You can see our construction line running through the middle of it. So I can go back and hide that again with the light bulb, turn that off. And then we're going to need a little post coming out of the middle here that we can put our clock hands on. So I'll create a sketch on the front of the circle. We'll sketch a circle. And I can snap it to the center here. And we'll make that quarter of an inch. We'll click Stop Sketch. And we'll extrude that out with the extrude tool. Click on that little circle and bring that out another quarter of an inch. Just a little peg. We'll click Save. All right, so we've got our clock body. If I go back up to the top level of my browser here and activate the whole assembly, now I'm going to right-click and we're going to make a new component again. So it comes up here as Component 2. So I'll click on it a couple times and give it a name. This is going to be our minute hand, so the larger hand on the clock. So we'll call it minute hand. Hit Enter. And now we got to give this thing some geometry, some shape here. So now that I'm in the minute hand, our body is sort of grayed out because the minute hand is what's activated. I'll create a sketch. We'll put it on that front plane. And I'm just going to sketch it off to the side here. And under the sketch menu, we're going to use a new tool here, sketch a slot. Technically we're not making a slot, but we're making that shape. So we're going to pick center to center slot. And we just pick 2 points. So I'll just go off in space here and pick this point and a point above it. So I click those 2 points, and now I'm kind of clicking and dragging out a width here for this slot shape. It's asking me to give it a diameter, basically. And I'm going to make that 1/2 inch, 0.5, and hit Enter. And then I'm going to draw, under the sketch menu, a circle, center diameter circle. And I'll snap it to the bottom center point of our slot. And we'll make that 1/4 of an inch to match the peg on the center of our clock. Now I haven't given this thing a height yet, and we're going to do a little bit of work with parameters again. So under Modify, Change Parameters, we're going to click the green plus sign, and we're going to call this the minute hand size. And it won't technically be the overall size. I'm just going to use this to dimension the center to center of that slot shape. So we know that our clock face diameter is the whole size of the clock, but we want that to be smaller. So we're going to divide it by, we'll multiply it by 0.5. And you can see down here where it says value, it's showing you the calculation. It's 3 inches because our clock face diameter was 6 inches. Maybe I'll multiply that by 0.45. So now it's 2.7 inches. And we can play with that later. But the reason I'm doing this is if we make our clock smaller, we want our hands to get smaller too, otherwise they're just going to look out of whack. So I want my minute hand size to be, about this fraction of our clock face. We'll click OK. And now if I put a dimension on this guy, go Sketch, Dimension, and I can go point to point, or I can just pick this construction line down the middle, drag it out here, and start typing MIN for minute hand size. I'll click to pick it, and then push Enter to commit it to my dimension. Now it shows 2.7 inches. So I'll stop the sketch, and we'll extrude this out, and we're going to make this 1/8 of an inch. So 0.125 or 1/8 will get you there too. And we've got one of our hands. All right, so before we make our next one here, John says, and there may be other stuff in the chat above it, but I haven't been watching. John says, why did you use a slot? The slot tool is just sort of a shortcut for making a shape that is fairly common. So I could have made, here we go. I could have made a half circle and a half circle and 2 lines and joined them together, but that slot tool is just sort of a shortcut. It puts all that geometry together, it creates the tangent constraints, it creates these parallel constraints, and just sort of does most of that work for you. So even though we're not cutting out a slot, it's convenient for the shape we want. All right. Any other questions, folks? Things are making sense so far, I hope.
Yeah, Ben, I think that was it. The ones above were just some chit-chat back and forth about the program. There weren't any questions up there.
Right on. Excellent. Okay. Now we're going to make our hour hand, and that's going to has to be shorter. So before we get into making that, let's go back into our parameters. Click Change Parameters here. So the minute hand size, we did some multiplication here to take our diameter and scale it down to a properly sized minute hand. So now if we go into User Parameters, click the green plus sign, we're going to make one for hours. So we'll say HOUR, hour hand size. And maybe I just want to make sure that the hour hand is 3/4 of an inch shorter than the minute hand. So I can take the minute hand size and type MIN, hit enter to pick it from the drop down. And now minute hand size, and let's say minus 0.75. I could do some multiplication, I could do a lot of other things. Fusion supports a lot of complex math functions if you really want to get into that. But this will always be 3/4 of an inch less than the minute hand. So right now that comes out to about 1.95 inches. Click OK. But now you can see that each of these parameters is sort of feeding off of each other. Like I can change the diameter, which will then affect the size of the minute hand, and then that feeds into the size of the hour hand. So I mean there's kind of multiple levels here, but everything updates based on the math that you set up here. Or you can just punch in straight numbers like we did with the diameter, and you don't have to use math if you don't want. So we've got our hour hand size. Click OK. And to save us a little bit of effort here, I'm going to right-click on the minute hand component and say Copy. And if you remember from last week, when we copied the table legs, we did a regular paste, and each leg was identical. You changed one and you changed them all. What we're going to do here is I'll go up to the top level of my browser, right-click, And instead of going paste, I'm going to hit paste new. So that's going to create a whole new component that's not tied to the original. So it'll be a sort of a standalone copy that we can play with. So if I say paste new, now it's dropped it right in the same spot as where the minute hand was. So you get this move tool. I'm going to grab this arrow here and just slide it over so I can work on it. And I'll click OK on the move window that's popped up here. And now it's just named here minute hand, copy 1. So I'll rename that to hour hand. And then we can activate the hour hand. And once it's activated, the history, the timeline down at the bottom is now for our new hour hand component. So I can go into this first sketch, right-click on it or double-click it. Oh, let's see, I gotta escape. Right-click. There we go. Edit sketch. And I can go back and change this dimension now. Double-click on it. It's still set to the minute hand size. We can type in our new hour hand size. Hit enter. And now it's shorter. You can still see this gray outline here because when I'm editing the sketch, it moved it back to its original position. Nothing to worry about there though. Stop sketch. Now we've got our minute hand and hour hand. I'm going to go back up to the top here and activate the whole assembly with that round button so we can see everything. And before we put this together, I'll just show off some of the magic of parameters here. Let's go change parameters so you can see it. So if all I do is change the size of my clock face, let's say 8 inches, everything else scales up to match. Our minute hand still fits, our hour hand is still shorter than the minute hand. I can set it down to 4. Everything gets smaller. As long as you set up some rules of how things are supposed to be built based off of each other, everything adjusts to fit.
This is so freaking awesome. I'm getting to understand why you prefer 360 over SketchUp. So this is really...
Yeah. Just to show you a quick example here, I opened this up a minute ago. This is a shelf that I built a while ago. I'm making a 3D model of it here. It's got some storage space inside. And in my parameters, I set up the size of the inside cavity because that's what's important to me. I don't care so much about the outside dimensions or the dimensions of each piece, but I want the inside to be, say, 5.5 inches high, 3.5 inches deep. So everything in this model will adjust based on that. So if I want to go 4.5 inches deep, the whole thing gets deeper. If I want to set the height smaller, everything adjusts to fit. So you can tweak stuff with parameters, and when you get into more complex models like this, it gets really interesting. So I could go from 30 inches down to 20, and all of my features are still there. These holes are still near the edge. I've got a different number of slots across the top, so you can do some really crazy stuff.
I keep thinking about my little folding table, and you could literally just pop it in here and make a kid-sized one or hit a button and it could be an adult-sized table. That easy.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's crazy cool.
All right, back to our clock. We're going to do a little bit of assembly here. After I take a little drink of water. Okay. So last week we did some rigid assembly joints. Today we're going to try something new. So under the Assemble area of the toolbar, you can say Joint, or there's a button for it up here with the what looks like two hinge pieces. So I'm going to make a new joint. And I should point out our whole assembly is active here. I'm doing these joints between the components happen up at the overall assembly level. So I'll say new joint. Now it says I've moved some stuff around here. I'm going to say capture position because I like where they're sitting right now. They're not overlapping with each other. So I'll say capture position. Oh, and I'm going to cancel this first. The clock body, I don't want that to move around. When I try to move the hands of the clock, I want this body to stay where it is. So I'm going to ground it. So I right-click on my clock body and say, where did it go? Oh, right at the top, second from the top, ground. And you can see this little red push pin icon means it's pinned down in space. I can't drag it around. So that'll keep things in place for later. All right, so back to our joint. Create a new joint. Capture position again. And now for the components, you always want to pick, the first one you want to pick is the piece you want to move. So I want to move this hand onto the clock. So I'm going to zoom in on this hole. I'm going to grab the, here's the front face. I want the back face here. So I'll go back and it's where that assembly coin is lit up on the center of the back of the hole. Click that. And actually, before I get too far, in the joint window here, we're not going to use a rigid joint. We're going to use what's called a revolute joint, so it'll be able to spin. And because I'm picking a circular feature here, this hole, it'll understand that we can spin around that. So I've got the back of the hand here, and then for component 2, the select button is already highlighted. It's blue. Let's zoom out. And I'm actually going to grab the base of this post here, not the front, but the base of it. So if I hover over the back of that post, that's the point where I want it to grab on. So I'll click there, and now it's just animated that once around. I can click the animate button here in the joint window just to see it again. So like that's the motion I want, and I will have a little bit of the post sticking out here where we can put the hour hand next. One thing you can see here is there's like a little light blue, what looks like a flag. That's just a sort of visual of you've got a joint here, you've got a revolute joint here. If you don't want to see those, because sometimes they can clutter things up visually, you can go under your assembly here in the joints folder. You can just turn off all the joints by clicking the light bulb, and they'll stay hidden out of sight. Sometimes they're useful to see, but usually it's just kind of visual noise. All right, next joint, we're going to do the same thing, make a new joint, and I'm going to zoom up on my hour hand, and this time I'm going to pick the front of the hole, so that little assembly coin is lit up on the front of the hole. So I'll click on that, and now I got to click where I want it to go, and I'm going to pick the front of our post here. So those 2 points will marry up, and because I picked a revolute joint, it will spin around that point. So we'll click OK here. So that's pretty simple to get things to assemble like that are supposed to rotate around each other. That's how you would assemble together any sort of pins or joints that need to connect like that. I'm going to save this real quick. Any questions at this point?
Robert Carpenter just asked, does it matter that one hand animates clockwise and the other one counterclockwise? I think he just did that for demonstration purposes.
I think when you pick depending on the assembly points that you pick, it just sort of figures out, what the positive rotation direction is. I think because of the geometry, it figured this one was supposed to go this way and this one turns the other way. It doesn't really matter so much. It's kind of arbitrary, and when we set up our the next thing here, we can compensate for that. If one goes the wrong way, we can just make a number negative and then it'll go the other way. So I wouldn't worry too much about why it picks the direction, because it's easy enough to work with.
Can you have multiple joints, rotating joints that will interact with each other, like say a leg that's walking, like a Theo Jensen leg?
Totally. I wanted to build something like that, but I didn't get it done in time. But for tonight, just to show off. But yeah, you can definitely have multiple things joined together that all interact with each other. You can have, you could make a scissor lift and have all of the components linked together, so you can pull the whole thing up and push the whole thing back down.
Nice.
Yeah, it gets pretty cool. So the next thing I'm going to show you under the Assemble menu is something called a motion link. This comes in handy if you have very specific movement that should affect, from one joint should affect another joint. Usually you see this with things like gears or like threaded rods and nuts, where you want the rotation of one thing to affect the rotation of another thing. And Fusion can do things like detect physical collision. So like if a gear hits another gear, it can make it push, but it really bogs down your computer, and Fusion has a hard time calculating all of that, what's touching what and how that affects the movement. So usually a motion link will let you set up, okay, I want one gear to turn twice for every one rotation of a different gear. So we're going to demonstrate that real simply here with these clock hands. So if I go under Assemble and say Motion Link, I have to pick two joints that will interact with each other. Now I've hidden them here, so I can't really pick them. I could turn them back on with the light bulb and pick them on here, just in the picture, or I can expand out my joints folder and pick the two joints here. So I'm going to pick this one, and they've been named automatically as Rev 1 and Rev 2. I could give these names as like the minute hand joint and the hour hand joint. I'm not going to take the time to do that right now, but it can be handy to keep things straight. So now I've picked the two joints here, and they've started spinning. But what we know about clocks is that they spin in a certain ratio to each other. So the minute hand goes around one time, but the hour hand only goes around 1/12, to the next hour. So if we start playing around here, Rev 1 was our minute hand. So I want that to go, for every 360 degrees on that one, I want the other one to go 360 degrees. And I could punch the number in here, or I can say slash, so I can divide that by 12. Oh, there we go. Now it's going really fast here, but you can see our hour hand is going slowly and our minute hand is going a lot faster. Now technically they're going backwards in this animation, but the direction doesn't really matter. What matters here is the relationship. So every rotation of every rotation of the hour hand is 12 rotations of the minute hand. So I could do this. I could say the first one times 12 and leave this one at 360. But you can play around with the numbers until you get the sort of different motion that you want. But now if I click OK, I'm going to hide those joints again. If I click and drag one of these hands around, let's grab the minute hand here. I'm going to click the end of it and drag it around. Now the hour hand is moving too, but it's moving at the right proportion. So I can drag this around to, let's say, about 9 o'clock here. 10, 11, 12. I'm going to hit Control Z to undo, put them back up vertically. But if you had two gears, like I said before, you could set up one gear for a certain amount of rotation and another gear for a different amount of rotation, and then you could get, a rough visualization to see how those two move together. All right, any questions on that?
Clicking reverse makes it clockwise, Mike asks.
Clicking reverse, was that in the...
You mentioned that if you wanted to change the direction earlier, you just hit the minus, you just added up.
Oh, yeah. So I built, let's see. So I built this clock the other day just to sort of prep for tonight's class, and for some reason when I had set it up, one of my hands was going the opposite direction, and that was kind of messing with my head. But you could go in here and let's say that was the case and one of these joints was spinning the wrong way. I could put a, I'll start the animation here. Oh, that's right, there's a reverse checkbox. There, so if you want the joints to act in a reverse way, I forgot about that checkbox, so thank you there. So now you can see they're spinning in opposite directions. If I uncheck that, they're going in the same direction. So you can either use reverse checkbox to make the two go reverse of each other or go in sync with each other, or you could put in negatives on the numbers. So yeah, there's actually a couple ways to tackle that.
Ben, I'd like to take a quick minute for class. We got, looks like about another 15, 20 minutes left to mention that Carl Jacobson has joined us. Carl will be teaching a turning class after the Fusion 360 class is over. Right about the same time, I'll be doing a introduction to furniture design class as well. And then shortly after that, we'll have the guys from Autodesk here teaching the advanced class. And when then that's over, Ben, if Ben's up for it, we're going to do another run for an intro, maybe do a little bit more for the guys who've been through the class already to try to, so sorry, I just wanted to plug that real quick.
Yeah, no, there's some good stuff coming up. Glad to hear it.
I don't see any other questions, Ben.
Alrighty. So the next bit here, I'm going to show you, so this is a bit fancier. We'll see how much we get to. I've made a pattern here of 12 circles around here for the hour markers. But the next thing I want to hit on, make sure we get it in tonight, is sort of this little, what looks like crown molding around the outside. This was inspired by Dennis, who sent me a question this week about modeling some crown molding he was having some trouble with.
I believe that's when I said, go find Ben.
There you go. So you may remember in a lot of the stuff we've done so far, we've used construction lines a lot, just sort of like reference lines so we can find the center of things, or we can mirror stuff or revolve stuff. When you're in the 3D space, you have what's called construction geometry. Up in the toolbar, actually before we get into that, I'm going to make sure I go to my clock body and activate it, because that's what I want to work on. I don't want to deal with the hands right now. So up in the toolbar, you've got this construct section. If we pull that down, you've got a whole bunch of, well, options for making two-dimensional planes. So if you need a flat surface to sketch on and it's not on your part, you can just make a plane out in the middle of space or related to something in your piece. You can also have axes. So if you want to make an axis through a hole or through an edge or through 2 points. and also just single points. Like if there's you want to reference a point somewhere to make a dimension off of or to assemble something to, you can put points into your model. We're going to make some construction planes through our clock body. And the one that I use most often here is called the midplane, if you want to find the middle of a 3D object. So if I pick midplane, and if I stop my mouse for a second, it says select two planar faces, planes, or a sketch profile. So it's saying find two flat things, and it'll put a plane in the middle between them. So I'm going to pick the right side and the left side. And now you can see this little orange plane that's popped up in the middle of our clock. And I'm going to do that again, construct a midplane. And this time I'm going to pick the top of our clock, and I'll change my view here and grab the bottom of the clock. And we have a nice horizontal plane right through the middle of our clock. Now, stick with me here because it's going to get a little bit crowded. We're going to put two more planes in here just for fun, because that's my idea of fun. We go under construction, and we're going to, where did it go? Second one down, plane at an angle. So if you picture those little, like what looks like crown molding, they came to 45-degree angles on the front corners. So if I click this edge, this front edge, now I've got a plane here, and I've got a little handle here. I can set the angle, or I can type it in. So I'll drag it over here to negative 45 degrees. Click OK. And now we can do some sketching. So I'm going to create a sketch, and I'm going to grab this vertical midplane here. And I'm just going to draw some lines here. I'm going to go under Sketch, Line, and I could do this as separate components if I really wanted to model out each piece of crown molding here, but this is just for the sake of model. So I drew 3 lines, and you know what, this 45-degree plane is getting in my way. I could hide it, but I'll change my view a little bit, and I can still sketch here. So now I can pick the pieces of my triangle. So I'm going to say midpoint. I want the middle of this line to intersect with let's see. There we go. So I went back to, I clicked look at, and that brings my view sort of back flat with my sketch. So I'm going to click the corner here. Oh, and then the line. There we go. So now it's centered there. We'll say equal constraint, make a, nope, no, I can't do that. Dimension. Sorry, I realize this is getting a little bit hard to follow. The point is, I'm making a triangle here. I don't need to fully constrain it for what we're doing. So we'll stop the sketch. And now it hid that plane because it figures I'm done with it because I made a sketch there. And that's fine for now. I can go to create an extrusion. And I will drag it out this way. And then for the extent, I'll say up to an object. And I'm going to pick this 45-degree plane here. And now it's extruded that crown molding piece here all the way up to the plane. I'll click OK. But now it has a nice 45-degree angle on it. And I didn't really have to tell it that. I just say extrude up until you hit this flat plane, and it stops and gives you that nice that nice angled face on there. Now to make the piece along the side here, I'm actually going to sketch on the back here, or on that plane, and extrude it up to meet it at the front corner. So I'm going to create some triangle out here in space. It's actually not on the back, but it's on the same flat plane as the back. So I'm going to make a new sketch. John says, can it calculate the center of gravity? Yes, I know that's in here. I don't remember off the top of my head, but maybe we can check that out later. All right, so I'm going to make a new sketch and click on the back of our clock here. Now, this is another cool thing that sometimes happens automatically if I try to sketch against things in my 3D part. It's called projection. I don't want to have to redraw this triangle and make it match exactly. I just want it to pick up that same shape. So if I turn my view here a little bit, I want this triangle to get projected back to where I'm sketching. So if I go down in the sketch menu here, all the way down almost to the bottom, there's a menu here that says project/include. And if I click on project or hit the P key, and I just start picking edges of this triangle, I'll pick the top edge. Now there's this purple line here back where I'm sketching. Same with this edge, and this edge. And now if we look at our sketch flat again, all these purple points and lines, those are valid lines in my sketch now. I didn't have to draw them. They're just automatically matched up with the crown molding that we made earlier. So I only made that triangle sketch once, and I extruded it out here, and now I'm picking it up back here. And if I went back and resized that, this would match it. So click OK. Now we've got that projected triangle, and I can extrude it. So I'll use the extrude tool, pick it here, and extrude it up to an object. And I'll pick this plane again, this 45-degree plane. Click OK. I'm going to, within the clock body, I can expand this out. And there's a folder in here called construction. So that's where my construction geometry is. That's where all those planes are. I'm going to turn off my 45-degree plane because it's just kind of getting in the way right now. I'll leave these, turn these mid planes back on. But now if I go, like I said, if I go back in my timeline and double click this sketch, I can drag this in, and now the rest of our molding is matched it.
So I'm jumping the gun here, Ben, but I'm assuming to get the other side, you just mirror it.
You got it. That's what I made those mid-planes for. I use mid-planes quite a bit because usually there's something symmetrical that you can mirror it over, so you only have to draw or generate a small part of it and then mirror it or pattern it from there.
Very nice.
So that's pretty easy here. So we will go to the Create menu, and we'll create a mirror. And you can mirror stuff in sketches, but since we're out in 3D space, we're using the Create because I'm creating some new 3D geometry here.
Okay.
So I'll create a mirror, and I'm going to pick features. So I'm going to pick those extrusions I made. So here's a feature, and down on my timeline, I can pick the first extrude and the second extrude. and pick our mirror plane. And you can see it's kind of showing you a little transparent preview of what it's going to look like. Now, there's different kinds of what are called compute options. Sometimes they can do funny things. It looks like that one took okay. I can't show you a good example of how it can go crazy sometimes, but if it doesn't look right when you're doing a mirror, sometimes you can pick one of the other options here, and that usually fixes it. Oh yeah, so here's one perfect example now. There we go. This looks really weird because it's remembering that I extruded up to this 45-degree plane. So it's trying to do that again, but over here, that 45-degree plane extends all the way back here. So that's what it tried to do. So it tried to follow my instructions a little bit too directly. So if I double-click and go back into my mirror, instead of adjust, I'll use optimized. And there, now it made more sense of what I was trying to do.
Okay.
And then we can do the same thing. We'll go up to Create and pick Mirror. And I like to use features, so I'm actually going to grab, you have to grab the original extrudes and the mirror. I think you have to do all three. Maybe you can just do the mirror. Then pick the plane, so I click on Select, and now I'll pick this other mid-plane, and now it's mirroring it down at the bottom. Click OK. We'll go into my clock body and hide these. Actually, I'm just going to turn off the whole construction folder, and then they all go away. We'll go back up to our top level and activate the whole assembly, so none of this stuff is grayed out. Now I've got a fancy looking clock. I can click and drag the hands around and they move like they're supposed to in relation to each other. So we'll set it to current time on the East Coast, roughly.
All right. How many components? Oh, sorry, Ben.
Just to show off the awesomeness of parameters, we'll let's tweak this. Let's say 4-inch clock face. Now my crown molding I set to a fixed size, so it's still big, but the clock is tiny.
Nice.
We say 7 inches. And if I don't like the size of the minute hand, instead of multiplying it by 0.45, let's say by 0.4, 40% of the diameter.
All right.
Now the minute hand shrunk, but the hour hand shrunk to match, so it's now 3/4 of an inch less.
All right. Very cool. Let's add, it's 9 o'clock. Let's go ahead and answer some questions and then call it a night. Is that okay?
Yep.
All right. All right. See where we go. Okay. Mike asks, how many components do you end up with the crown molding? He's talking about the crown.
Yeah, so in this case, when I did all of these extrusions for the crown molding, I was doing, let's pick this first one. Under the extrude operation, I picked join. So I was actually just sort of adding more clay to my sculpture here, sticking on more geometry, so it became all one piece. If I really wanted to, I could have created this extrusion as a new body. Usually there's a new component option there. Maybe there's a reason for that. I'm not sure off the top of my head. But I could have made a new component and then created that piece of crown molding separately. So you can have as many components as you want, really, but for simplicity's sake, I just kept the clock body as one single component. So it's just one big solid piece. But yeah, you could break this up into separate pieces and generate them individually too.
Very cool. Um, so if you were to make the, let's say the molding on the top, one individual piece, is there a way where the joints are, like how you mirrored it, is there a way to remove that joint? Is it necessary to remove that joint?
Um,
The
oh,
sun,
like the edge.
yeah, the joint in the center where they put together where you mirrored it.
Right, because I made this all one solid piece, Fusion understands that those were touching there, so it sort of welded that together into one piece. But yeah, if I had done, let's see, cancel. Let's go into the clock body again. I could have done this as a, oh, here, never mind. Let's go into the first mirror. There we go. Oh, no. All right, the first extrude, I could have said, instead of joining it to the rest of the clock body, I could call it a new body. And then that would be like a separate piece, but it would still be underneath the component here. Oh, now it's, I've created some errors for myself here, so this sketch just lit up in yellow. So I'd have to go through my timeline and sort of fix a few things to get it all to work, be happy again. But yeah, point being, within a component you can have separate 3D bodies, you know, chunks that don't weld to each other.
So if you're
So if
building
I had
a
made these
motorcycle,
as separate bodies, then they wouldn't be, then you would see the seams. Yeah, it all depends on how you build it. I know that's kind of a throwaway answer, but yeah.
no, that makes sense. I mean, if you're going to build a motorcycle, you want the wheels and the tires to be separate parts, separate components. So, right.
Yep.
Same thing with furniture, I guess. But all right, cool. All right, guys. Any more questions for Ben before we have a little open discussion? Give it a minute. If any of these guys type as fast as I do, I ought to give them 5 minutes. So, all right, it looks like we're good. I wanted to ask real quick for you guys that are in here still hanging out with us, if Wednesday nights work well for you guys, if there's other nights of the week that work better. I mean, if I see a resounding day that works better for classes, I'm thinking about, you know, classes down the road, not for, you know, not for the fusion class, but is Wednesday nights okay with you guys for classes? Don't everybody answer at once.
Oh, the chat's coming in. Either Jamie's nodding yes or he's rocking out over there. I can't quite tell.
Okay. All right. It looks like they must have Disturbed playing in the background or something. All right. Is there an easy way to resize all the molding? I'm sorry, Christopher. I didn't see your question. I apologize. I had, for some reason, my chat froze on wherever it was. Oh, thank you. Tim says, excellent lesson, Ben.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, guys. Yeah, so the molding, right now, because I defined it all in that first sketch, I have to go back into that sketch and change it. But if I had put a parameter in there for, say, molding size and use that parameter on the dimensions, then I could just change a parameter and I wouldn't have to drill down into the sketch every time. So that's kind of a convenience thing. If you want to play around with the size of something, but you don't want to have to find that sketch every time and edit it, that's where parameters really save you some time. If you use a parameter in your sketch, then you don't have to dig back down into that sketch just to change it. But if yeah, like I said, if I drag it around and resize it, then it'll progress through the timeline again and use that geometry. You know, that purple projection will pick up the new shape.
Okay.
And that'll flow through.
Robert, you have a very good point, by the way. Robert Carpenter says if they couldn't make it Wednesday, they wouldn't be here. So I was like, okay, yeah.
Good call.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Wednesday works well for me. I mean, maybe the next time we do this class, my schedule might work out for a different day of the week, but
Yeah, I was
once
just
again
thinking
working
like
well.
for Carl's class or for other classes we know.
Right on.
And
Yep.
I may ask that out in the Facebook group for the TMA just so to get a get a feel because I want to give Carl a really good time slot and I'll take the bad one. So, but anyway, yeah, thanks guys for coming. Great class, Ben. Again, Ben, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Oh, really appreciate it. Yeah, I use a 3D mouse, Sean, and it works with this. It works with Fusion. It takes a little bit to get it to work with Fusion. You can't just like plug it in and start working. You have to mess around a little bit with settings.
Yeah, you have to tell me how you like that. I might have to try one of
I
those
love
someday.
it. Well for SketchUp I love it because I can just dial. I mean, it's really intuitive. I can dial right in on very small components or whatever I need, and then of course I can use it to make chroma key stuff for videos. So I can green out the background and make a object float around, and then just chroma key it out in editing software so it looks like you can see the 3D model.
hmm I haven't figured out a way to chroma key in Fusion, or at least change the background color, but I think this default here, this background isn't exactly white. It's more of an off-white, so you might be able to key off of that for your video stuff. But
Yeah, I was curious about that. The other thing too, I noticed is that I can take models out of Fusion and import them into SketchUp if that was necessary.
oh, there you go. Yeah, you could export a STL even and bring
Yep,
that in.
yep. So
Nice.
I'm actually really excited about today's lesson. The parameters thing kind of sold me on this. I mean,
hmm
I love SketchUp because I'm fast at it. It's not necessarily a real powerful compared to this, but I'm fast at it and it kind of suits what my needs. But
hmm
with the whole parameters thing and in the folding, I have some folding projects coming up. This is just going to make, I mean, that's huge. It's huge. So I guess I'm going to have to give up a little gym time to start working on this a little harder. So,
Yeah.
all right, guys.
Play around with it, make some small assemblies just to get your head wrapped around how that stuff works. Um, but yeah, once you kind of get it, you can build some really neat stuff.
I'm looking forward to it. All right,
hmm
guys. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Again, next Wednesday we'll be back for our 5th class, and we'll just keep moving forward. So we got classes pretty much planned forever at this point. So you guys will have plenty of classes available for everybody. And thank you for coming tonight, and we will talk to you all very soon. Good night.
That all.